Well, hey guys and gals, I'm Andy Asher. I'm editor over here at bloomerboomer.com, and continuing into the second season now is with Dr. Gregory Hammer. He is the author of Gain Without Pain. It's the happiest handbook, or the happiness handbook for healthcare professionals. Now, today, Dr. Hammer, he talks about the three legs of the tripod. And by the way, just want to invite you to like us and follow us on your favorite social media. To hear more about what we're doing. We're live streaming everything. All right. So you want any more information? Just go to bloomerboomer.com. And let's go ahead and let's get together with Dr. Gregory Hammer and his book, Gain Without Pain: Happiness, the Happiness Handbook for Healthcare Professionals. And hey, Greg Hammer, it's great having you here again.
Great to be back with you, Andy.
Well, listen, I know that you and I talked about a few topics we really want to focus in on. Let me get my mic in here a little bit better in case people can't hear me too well. We're talking about the three legs of the tripod, and give us a hint a little bit about what that's all about.
Sure. The point is that we have to take care of our physical bodies and our physiology. And so I think that we could talk about the three important ingredients for that. And that is, they are sleep, exercise, and nutrition. And they're very much interrelated. And they're very much a problem for many people, especially during COVID, where the chronic stress of the pandemic and how each of us has some special circumstances that may be exacerbating that generally global stress that we all experience, that tends to create some degree of fear and anxiety. And as we kind of obsess over what's going to happen next in ways that are maladaptive, and that anxiety may keep us up at night. And so our sleep is really degraded. Many of us are not sleeping that well these days. Many of us don't sleep that well in general, but I think to the extent that we have difficulty, it's probably exacerbated related to the pandemic. And then we get run down, we feel tired, we don't feel like exercising. This affects so many things, including our mood. And we're feeling kind of low energy, and so we reach for sugary foods to get a brief boost in our energy, or we reach for fatty comfort foods that may not be healthy for us. And so, again, these kind of all are self-propagating. That is, the disturbances in our sleep, exercise, and nutrition. So this is something we really need to focus on. We need to get right with our bodies before we can go to the next level and become emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually fully healthy. So we can start with sleep. Are we still have each other, Andy?
Greg, it's the thumb that never hits the right point, and I didn't turn my mic on, so I apologize. Yeah, we're still here.
No problem.
And so I know last week we were talking about COVID and how it applies to some of the teachings in the book, and it really does apply because you have to give some mental effort to getting through difficult times.
Absolutely, and times are difficult. I think again, we there's a sort of shared pain and suffering that we all experience. We're all very much empathetic with our brothers and sisters who may be out of a job, who may be very isolated, who may have school-aged children at home and are going through a very challenging time having them try to learn at a distance. And these things and other factors related to the pandemic is just creating this sense of what a weird world it is. And those of us who are working at home also have the issue of our work time kind of blending ambiguously with family time, with recreation time, exercise time, having a going to sleep time, a waking up time, and a schedule. And so I think we really have to bring our focus back to the present and establish our intention for improving our sleep, exercise, and nutrition so that we can get back on track.
Absolutely. Now, in relation to that, Anthony, in terms of some of the questions that have come in, is having trouble remaining resilient in the midst of all of this, and he feels he's not sure how gain fits into that, but he's just asking, maybe there's an idea that you can share with him about that.
Well, I think in general, I would certainly recommend going back to the principles of gain to find resilience and the ability to be present where happiness dwells in the present moment. And of course, many of us are very distracted and thinking about the past and regrets and shame and thinking about the future and catastrophizing and generating a lot of unnecessary fear and anxiety. So we need to be mindful and bring our focus back to the present. And ways that we can do that, according to the gain ideals, are to first remember our gratitude, remember that for which we are so grateful. Even during the pandemic, we're so much better off than we were, say, or our ancestors were 100 years ago during the great influenza pandemic. We have such improved access to medical care, good food, safe and warm place to live and sleep. We may be physically isolated, but we don't have to be virtually isolated from our loved ones. We have, as we're experiencing now, Zoom and Skype and Facebook, for example. We have a lot for which to be grateful, in addition to the health that we have and loved ones, friends, and family. So let's focus on our gratitude. Let's also accept that which is painful to us and identify those things that are painful and sit and open our hearts to that pain and suffering and bring it closer and closer until we merge with it and let that just kind of simmer. And we'll find in general that the pain is not as great as we thought it was once we're fully accepting. And we talked about the fact that suffering equals pain times resistance, and acceptance is the opposite of resistance. And so we have a pain, we can resist it, in which case the suffering is magnified, or we can accept it, bring it closer, merge with it with an open heart, and the suffering is diminished, even though the pain is still there. Intention is the I in gain, and we need to recognize we can be purposeful about the way we live, and we can rewire our brains, even those of us over 55. It's not too late. We can actually change our negativity bias and become more positive by focusing on things we have rather than what we don't have. And, we talked about practicing 3 good things before we go to sleep, thinking of 3 things that went well during the day, such as this session we're having now, Andy. That will be one of my 3 things tonight. And that actually will help us sleep and make us happier people. That's an example of setting our intention and how it can really benefit us by helping us rewire our negative thinking brains. And then the end in gain being non-judgment and recognizing that we are constantly labeling things as good or bad or comparing ourselves to others, and often not favorably because we're related to our negativity bias, very harshly critical and judgmental of ourselves. So we need to sit with that and learn how to drop judgments and recognize that it actually feels good to just see the world as it is, exactly as it is. We didn't create it. We're not going to change it. And so let's just accept it in a neutral manner and not judge everything in our experience. And so those gain fundamentals really can help us focus on the present moment and be more resilient and happy. And I strongly recommend that we have a 3 to 5 minute period dedicated in the morning where we can do our gain meditation. And we talked about that last week. So I'm hoping that's helpful to people and bring us all back to our center. And then today we were going to talk about sleep, exercise, and nutrition, because those, when they're disordered or out of whack, as they are for many of us in the pandemic, can really throw us for a loop and make it very hard to be present. So
Indeed,
I hope that's helpful, but it's, baby steps. Let's not
Mm-hmm.
expect too much of ourselves. Just take baby steps forward, embrace the practice. Don't expect that we're going to go from A to Z in one day. We took decades to have our minds function the way they do. We're not going to change that overnight, but as long as we're making progress, we should feel good about ourselves.
Yeah. Here's another pandemic question from Beth. Do you foresee the possibility that we'll find positive ways of being once this pandemic comes to pass?
I think there are many areas in which there will be a paradigm shift. I think, for example, people working largely remotely and not having to spend an hour or more doing a round trip, aggravating commute, for example, being able to get work done in the privacy and comfort of their own home. In addition, I think we are learning to appreciate each other's company. We're deprived of it in so many cases, and really appreciating the friends and loved ones that we have in ways that we perhaps took for granted before. Yes, I think there will be some changes that will endure, and hopefully we can take the positive elements, such as the opportunity to spend more time with our families, not to have to spend a lot of time commuting, being a little more focused on resilience and adopting some new practices as our paradigm for living. I think there will be some enduring positive silver lining effects from the pandemic for sure.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Hammer, I know you're going to take a little hiatus, and maybe in the meantime, folks can get your book, and if you can just maybe during the next few weeks when we go through the holidays and all that, kind of leave us with maybe some go-to ideas or action items that we can take.
Sure. Well, we've kind of covered a lot of what I've written about, but I just did want to comment briefly about those three elements of sleep, exercise, and nutrition if we have a few more minutes.
Absolutely.
So sleep hygiene, this stuff is not rocket science. We should have a regular bedtime and a regular wake time, even in the pandemic when our schedules seem so flexible. And I think that going to sleep, we should practice three good things before we get in bed and reflect on what went well and the joy of living and what transpired during the day. Let's identify at least three positive things as opposed to dwelling on what didn't go well today. Avoid alcohol, I think, for 4 hours or more before going to sleep. Cut down on caffeine also, because caffeine, as we've, I think, mentioned, has a long half-life of 6 to 8 hours. So if you have a second cup of coffee at 8 o'clock in the morning, that caffeine is still with you, 50% of it in the afternoon, in the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, early afternoon time. And that's like having one cup of coffee at 8 and another cup of coffee in the early afternoon. So by the time you're going to sleep, you still have a fair amount of caffeine circulating in your body. And we should be mindful of that. I've cut back on the coffee that I have in the morning, and I've quit the afternoon cup altogether. I used to think if I didn't have a cup after 2 o'clock, that was fine, but I sleep much better having no caffeine after 8:30 or 9 in the morning. So, and alcohol may help us fall asleep, but alcohol and the medications people may take for sleep do not give us the fully restorative kind of sleep. Those drugs interact with a receptor called the GABA receptor. And when the GABA receptor is stimulated, we get sleepy, but we don't have normal REM sleep, and the other phases of sleep are disordered. So let's be mindful of that. It's a good idea to write down things that we may be worried about that are going to keep us awake. If we have a list of things we need to do the next day, let's write them down before we go to sleep so we can kind of offload them. Do what we can to darken our rooms. And if we like sleeping in a cool environment, let's try to cool off the room in the evening. If it means air conditioning or opening some windows, let's be mindful that light and temperature have a big effect on our sleep. Exercise, let's get out and do something every day, just at least going for a walk. We can pick up the pace over time if we're really out of shape. But exercise has really beneficial effects on our physiology, on our cardiovascular system, our immune system, and also tends to preserve telomere length. We talked about telomeres being the little caps at the end of our chromosomes that keep them from fraying and becoming damaged, much like the tips on our shoelaces. So let's get out and get moving every day. Let's not just sit around like a bump on a log, as my father used to say. And finally, nutrition. Let's try to minimize sugary foods, fatty comfort foods, processed foods, and eat as naturally as we possibly can, and try to confine our eating to regularly scheduled meal times, even though our schedules may be disordered during COVID. And we can focus on nutrition that works for us. Some people are experimenting with intermittent fasting, with ketogenic diets, with low carbohydrate diets, or low fat diets. I'm not an advocate in particular of any of those. I think a balanced diet is probably the most sensible way to go, with really a minimum of sugary and processed food. So whatever works for the individual is fine, but let's be mindful of our sleep hygiene, and let's get exercise on a daily basis, and let's really focus on eating well in addition. And I know it's easy to kind of sit with a bowl of crackers or some other processed food when we're sitting at home all day, but let's kind of put that aside and refocus. And I think attending to our sleep, exercise, and nutritional habits will put us back on track for being centered and much more resilient.
Yeah, well, as you said in the beginning, it's not that difficult. I guess it's just more difficult to follow it, but that's good advice.
Basic principles.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Greg, it's been great, and look forward to your pocket book that's going to be coming out, and maybe we'll catch up with you on that, and if not before. So it's really good, and everybody can have a chance to look at all the shows over at our on the website. So I encourage you to do it, and Greg, thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me, Andy. It's been a lot of fun, a great pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, Greg will be taking a hiatus for a while, but I just want to let you know, and again, Dr. Gregory Hammer, author of Gain Without Pain, the Happiness Handbook for Healthcare Professionals, and you can find out more over on about us, Bloomer Boomer, over on Facebook at bloomerboomer.com. And if you like what we're doing, please like us on your favorite social media. And until next time, we'll see you then.